All right, it's a challenge today. We're choosing one whiskey from 5 different whiskey categories. I'm Jeff. This is G Whiskey. Stick around. Okay, so this is a fun one. I'm choosing 5 whiskeys from 5 different whiskey categories, and all of these categories were cooked up by my buddy Phil over at First Fill Whiskey. And his thing is he wanted a more comprehensive way to describe whiskey, because traditionally we might just say something is bourbon matured, implying that it's a little bit lighter in character. We might say it's sherried, implying more richness, more dark red fruits. And we might say it's peated, implying it's got those smoky flavors. And granted, that is a good chunk of the whiskey out there, but it's not everything. So Phil, being the pioneer that he is, decided to cook up a list that he felt more comprehensively described the flavors that we get in whiskey. And those categories are light and fruity, rich and spiced, peat and smoke, wood and grain, and finally, heavy funk. He also put together a poster that I'll link down below. I actually have one on the way. Sadly, it's not arrived yet in time for this video, but the poster gives you each of the different categories of whiskey and a lot of the flavors that you might find within each category. So not only is it a useful poster, it actually looks really cool too. He did a great job with it. And listen, I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're thinking, Jeff, why are you being so nice today? You usually take the piss out of Phil. What gives? Yes, that's true, and I admit it is weird. But Phil actually reached out and asked me to specifically stop making fun of him. I often make jokes at Phil's expense, but last week Phil emailed me, he reached out and he asked me to stop. The email goes as follows. Hey Jeef, hope you're good, mate. Just want to ask if you could be nice and not make fun of me anymore. It makes me sad and it makes me want to cry. Spelled C-W-Y. And then he follows it up with a bunch of crying baby faces. So Phil, I want to apologize to you. I never meant to hurt your feelings. On my end, it was just a little bit of light banter. Didn't mean to cause any emotional distress. I'm sorry. I don't know why I do this to him. He's so nice. Anyway, 5 whiskeys, 1 from each of the aforementioned categories, and I'm going to put my own little spin on this challenge because I'm going to have 2 whiskeys from each of the categories. One is going to be more on the affordable side, and then the second one is going to be without any budget constraints. And the cutoff for that is going to be $100 US, so I'm going to have 1 pick below that and 1 pick above that. It could be well below or well above. Doesn't really matter. It's all arbitrary, and we're all going to die someday. As usual, I've got a mystery pour in the glass. This is a budget-friendly 12-year-old whiskey that would fit very nicely into the rich and spiced category. Your hint is that this is from a brand that typically makes sherried whiskeys. It's a very popular release, and they rebranded last year to mixed reception. I think probably a good chunk of you are going to be able to guess what that is, but either way, good luck with that. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump into our list. It's not a list, it's a challenge. So let's jump into our challenge. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. Okay, so let's kick things off with a light and fruity category, which as the name implies is on the lighter side. So we might be using more ex-bourbon casks or something of the like in the mix. We might have some florals in there. We have some lighter fruits. Not too much on the oak, not too much on the dark fruit flavors. And my pick from the more budget-friendly end of this category is going to be the only non-Scotch on this list. It is a single malt though. It's English, it's from the Bimber distillery, and this one's called the Bimber Ex-Bourbon Oak Casks, I think is the name. This is a batch release. I have batch 4 from 2023. This stuff is bright, vibrant, clean, floral, so it fits the description to a T. Comes in at 51.4%. It's non-chill filtered, it's natural color, and it's not too expensive. So I really enjoy this one, highly recommend it. But if you're willing to spend a little bit more, my recommendation for the less budget-friendly side of things is going to be Longmorn 18 cask strength. Now, despite that higher price tag, I still absolutely love this stuff. I think it's a gorgeous whiskey. I don't think they give us the cask breakdown. I probably should have done a bit of research, but it might have a bit of sherry in there. I don't know, but it's primarily, despite being 18 years old, a distillate-driven whiskey with some brighter, lighter features that I always enjoy in Longmorn. I want to taste that beautiful distillate. And it comes in at 50, what's our ABV here? Hold on, let me check. 57.6%, so we have great intensity. Both of these are absolutely beautiful whiskeys, granted at pretty different ends of the pricing spectrum in that Longmorn. I'm not gonna lie, it's expensive stuff, but yeah, really, really good. So there we go. We have Bimber Ex-Bourbon Oak Casks and Longmorn 18 cask strength. Next, we're gonna go into the rich and spiced category. So this is the stuff that's more cask forward. You might be looking at sherry leaning or port leaning stuff, wine casks, whatever. So you're gonna have heavier, deeper, potentially richer flavors in these. My pick for the budget-friendly end of this is going to be a whiskey that I have talked about recently on the channel. I really like it, and that's the That Boutique Whiskey Company Speyside 12-Year-Old. This bottle is part of their core range, so it is not a one-off release, it's a standard release. It is a mystery malt though, so we don't know which distillery it comes from. This gives us 45.8% ABV, and it's got a wonderful, rich, sherry-forward profile. The casks here are not over the top, but they do lend some beautiful red fruit flavors, and it's not too expensive. Highly recommend this one, guys. I think it's one of the best sherry 12-year-olds on the market right now for a very fair price tag. Now, if we're looking to go up a little bit in price, my premium pick isn't actually that expensive. It's one of the most affordable 18-year-olds out there. I'm going with the Glenmorangie 18. Now, this one is not going to be a sherry bomb or even necessarily sherry forward. It is certainly sherried, and you're going to pick up on that, but yeah, not a bomb by any means, but it's firmly within the category of being rich and spiced, and it is a beautiful whiskey. I think it gets overlooked. What's interesting here is that we currently have two versions of this available on the market, or at least I do here. There is the older version that looks like this, and this one is going to be much more lush and rich and sherry forward. So if that's your preference, I highly recommend picking this one up while you still can. Oppositely, we have the newer one called the Infinita, and this one is brighter, it's more floral, and it's more spicy. Now, to be honest, I like them both, but they do different things. Personally, I think either one is a good pick. It's just going to be a matter of where your preference lies. Now, this will be kind of a controversial choice because it's not the kind of whiskey that most enthusiasts go for. It's 43%. It's not natural. It's colored. It's chill filtered. And at 18 years old, I understand if that puts you off. At an 18-year-old age and at that price point, you might expect more in terms of the specs. Fair play. But I think this is wonderfully blended. I absolutely love the creamy, rich, spicy flavors in this. And it's just a whiskey that I thoroughly enjoy. So feel free to yell at me down below in the comments, but I like the stuff. So there we go. Number one is That Boutique Speyside 12-Year-Old, and number two is Glenmorangie 18. Next up, we're looking at Peat and Smoke, which I'll admit is not my favorite style, but once in a while, I do love a good peated whiskey. It does take a mood. I think most of the time I gravitate more towards the light and fruity or the rich and spiced, but when the mood hits, nothing slaps like a peated whiskey. And for my more affordable pick here, I think I might surprise some of you with this, but I'm going with the standard Long Grow, which is peated Springbank. Now, if you're thinking he's chosen a Springbank, so that's immediately something I'm not going to be able to find. Normally, it's the core range, it's the standard Springbanks that are tougher to find. In my market, it's not that hard to track down a Long Grow, and I've checked some of the major online retailers. A lot of them have it in stock, so it's not unobtainium. So if you can find this one and you're typically a fan of peat, I definitely recommend it. This is a very honest, straightforward, well-executed, richly peated, coastal Campbelltown style of whiskey. And yeah, just beautiful stuff. It can hold its own against anything from Islay or from the islands. Just quality peated whiskey. Now, for my more premium recommendation, I'm going to go with something from Port Charlotte. This is a pretty recent release. It's part of their cask exploration series. I'm going to recommend the SYC01, which is just beautiful stuff. It's been finished in Syrah wine casks, and this one is a little bit interesting. I would say it's more rounded and less challenging than a lot of the previous releases from this line, but it's still wonderful. We have a lot of beautiful, rich peat and sweet jammy fruits. And coming in at 54.4% ABV, this has a wonderful intensity, it's got great balance, and I'm always a fan of the cask play in this series. I think it's just really well done. So those are my two picks for smoky and peaty. We have the Long Grow, and we have the Port Charlotte SYC01. Now we're going to move into the wood and grain category, and this is a category that lends itself more towards things like bourbons, maybe Canadian whiskeys, much more prominent oak, and if we're dealing with grain, it's not necessarily single malt, so there we go. And for my pick at the more budget-friendly side of this category, I'm going to go with the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, which is 43.2%, and it's been finished in a heavily toasted, lightly charred barrel. And on paper, I didn't think I would like this one. And that's not because I don't like Woodford Reserve. In fact, I do. I quite like the brand. I think the standard Woodford Reserve is one of the best budget-friendly basic bourbons out there, especially if you're coming from the world of Scotch. But my concern was, why do we need a finish here? Is that going to make it too sweet? And as it turns out, no, it doesn't. What it does do is add some rich, lush, more robust flavors to the profile. Now, moving into my more premium pick, this is a little bit tricky because I don't want to get into the allocated stuff, but I am here to spend over $100 and I'm kind of, confused. Where's that going to take me? Apparently that takes me back to Woodford Reserve. I'm going to recommend the Woodford Reserve Batch Proof, which is beautiful whiskey. By the way, Woodford is not paying me for this. I wish they would. I just think this is a good brand if you're coming from the world of single malts because it is on the more delicate side of bourbon. I feel like there's more nuance and there's more florals in there. And all of those wonderful characteristics are still there in the batch proof release. It's just that everything's amped up to 11. We get more complexity, more intensity, but we haven't compromised that Woodford character, which, like I said, is one of my favorite bourbon characters. And this is a bottle that doesn't get discussed too much in the bourbon community, which I kind of understand because it's more prohibitively priced than a lot of other batch proof or high proof stuff. But regardless, absolutely beautiful stuff. So we got the double oaked and we have the batch proof, both from Woodford Reserve, both excellent. All right, our last category for today is going to be heavy funk, which is hard to describe. Funk is one of those things a lot of people have their own definitions of. It's hard to put into words. Typically, funk might get described as flavors that are kind of maybe lactic or a little bit cheesy or a little bit farmy. Often these are heavier, more challenging whiskeys. And as challenging as that term is to describe sometimes, most of us know funk when we have it, when we taste it. Now, for my budget-friendly option on this category, for this category, I'm going to go with a very divisive whiskey. I got the Classic Laddie here. This one was my whiskey of the year a few years back, and I still love it. I still think it's an underappreciated whiskey. It's 50%, it's fully natural, so non-chill filtered, natural color. We have some wine casks in the mix, although they're not too forward. I would say this is more of a distillate-driven profile, and it does have a slight tinge of what some people consider to be a lactic funk. And because of that, this is not a whiskey that everyone can get along with. I know plenty of people who don't like this stuff, but I do. We can only ever speak for ourselves, so I'm recommending it. It's not too expensive, and I think it's delicious. So Classic Laddie, budget-friendly pick, and if we're going to the more premium range, more Bruichladdich. I'm going to give you guys the Bruichladdich 18, which is a new release, relatively new release from early last year. I reviewed it recently. I scored it a 90. This is a beautiful whiskey. I love it, and it's also definitely not for everyone. In my review, I talked about how this kind of has a wonky balance, and that's true. And beyond that, this does not taste as rounded or sophisticated or even as mature as a lot of other 18-year-olds on the market. And to add to that, it's more expensive. So a lot of people, not fans of this stuff. I get it. Personally though, I just love this stuff. I think it's interesting and complex and weird and funky. All of those you could use as criticisms, but I just connect with the flavors here and I just enjoy how unique it is. So there we go. Heavy funk, the whole category dominated by Bruichladdich here. We've got the Classic Laddie and Bruichladdich 18. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of today's challenge. I hope you enjoyed the video. And of course, I want to hear from you. So I want to hear what your favorite whiskey is currently from each of those categories. I don't even remember what they are. Our categories are light and fruity, rich and spiced, peat and smoke, wood and grain, and heavy funk. I'm looking forward to reading what you guys chose for your favorites in each of those categories. And finally, if you stuck around to find out what the mystery pour in the glass is, I mentioned that this is a 12-year-old from a brand that specializes in sherry that recently rebranded to mixed reception. A bit of a mouthful. What I'm drinking is Glenallachie 12. I've got the new version here. I have talked about the previous version, but I've not talked about the updated version, so we'll see if there's any differences or if I've changed my opinions at all. This one is very sherry forward. It's cask dominated. It's popular. It's affordable. It's an interesting whiskey. Stay tuned next week. I'll be talking about it then. Hey guys, Editing Jeff here. Just a quick little add-on. This is a challenge video, but I actually forgot to send it forward and challenge somebody else. So my challenge for this video, same concept, is for Ash over at Whiskey Wars. So Ash, let's see what we got for this one. And that brings us to the end of the video. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you want to help out, I have Patreon and PayPal linked down below. Here are my patrons. Thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you to my channel members. And thank you for watching and for being just great. Bye.